Now, the best way to start off this video is to highlight this tweet that Elon Musk recently made where he literally called Mark Zuckerberg a cuck, in which I immediately had to tap that like button simply because of the novelty and how funny Elon Musk's humor could be sometimes. However, in all seriousness, I want to highlight this tweet that was much more notable by Elon Musk, in which he tweets out a photo of the Cybertruck stating that he has recently driven the Cybertruck around Austin. Now, the reason I say this tweet is much more notable is because it's a reminder that the catalyst event of the production for Cybertrucks is just right around the corner, because we've heard Elon Musk in previous earnings calls state that the production for the Cybertrucks will be starting for the summer of this year. Although it will be a minuscule amount, it will begin for the summer of this year. Now, the reason the production of the Cybertruck is something that we want to pay attention to is not simply because the Cybertruck looks like a unique looking vehicle, but simply because historically trucks on average in America month over month sell about 4 times more than regular passenger vehicles. And so by adding the Cybertruck lineup into Tesla's product line, this is going to be very interesting to watch, because will the numbers hold up, or we're going to see this multiplier of 4x in terms of sales, which could definitely push Tesla to another level when we're talking about the fundamentals. But in terms of catalyst events that are for sure happening this week that are going to be disruptive for the overall market, including Tesla, we have to turn our attention to this list of a plethora of Federal Reserve speakers that are going to be speaking for this entire week, along with the data that's going to be coming out, which is going to be the CPI report and the core CPI report, where we're going to see a better gauge of where we're at currently with inflation. Now, taking a look at Tesla from a technical perspective, one of the things I've highlighted in recent videos is that we have this gap that we gapped up after Tesla had a record number of deliveries, and it's very likely and probable that as we head into this week where we're going to have a lot more volatility and uncertainty, we're possibly going to be seeing Tesla fill down on this gap. Now, I know that when I talk about Tesla going down on this channel, a lot of viewers don't like that, but we also have to be realistic and acknowledge the fact that Tesla so far this year has had an amazing run. And of course, stocks don't just always go up. We have to obviously be realistic and understand that it's very healthy for stocks to kind of pull back a bit. But with that said, I want to go ahead and hop into my laptop so that we get a better picture of what we're looking at when it comes to looking at Tesla from a technical perspective. Alrighty, so we are officially in my laptop taking a look at Tesla. Now, for those of you guys that are new to the channel, I do want to reiterate a certain point, and that is the fact that when it comes to technical analysis, this is something that I don't typically put too much weight on, right? Now, I know that may come as a shocker to some viewers, especially because a lot of the other individuals that you may watch on YouTube put much more emphasis on, looking at the charts, right? Now, technical analysis does have its time and place. However, at the end of the day, it's really just one data point, right? And there's several other data points that really influence the price action for a stock. I mean, you have the fundamentals, right? What the company's actually doing, and that's really what investors are putting their money into a stock, right? Although at times there may be different times where people are just throwing money and they don't understand why they're putting money in a stock, and that certainly does happen in the overall markets. But generally speaking, people are looking to make a return on their investment. And so, we put much more emphasis on things like fundamental analysis, but of course there's catalyst events, there's also alternative data, right? There's also the economic conditions, right? There's monetary policies, fiscal policies, several things that could influence the price action of a stock, right? And so just looking at the charts and saying, hey, it broke this level, so it has to go down, well, that's not really a good way to look at the market, right? Of course, a lot of individuals who are primarily chartists, right, when they say a stock is coming down, you ask them the reason why, they'll say, well, it broke down a certain level, right? And so, I like to take a much more holistic approach and understand the underlying, reasoning why a stock is going down, right? It's not just because it broke a line. I mean, stocks don't have to adhere to whatever squiggly lines you draw on the chart, right? And I know I say this often and it may come off redundant for anyone who is a loyal viewer of the channel, but I think it's important to kind of just re-emphasize that. Now, talking about Tesla, I do look at technical analysis a little bit much more than I do with any other particular stock. Now, the reason being is because technical analysis is something that is a favorite among a lot of retail, right? Because obviously fundamental analysis is something that typically individuals may get if they're retail, but it requires much more education, and it's much more easier for retail to understand just like lines and what's going on in the charts. And so one of the things we know with Tesla is that this is a stock that is held mostly by retail, right? It's a favorite among retail, which is good. This is always a good thing to have a company that's not yet heavily invested by institutional investors, right? And the reason being for that is because if you have a stock heavily invested and oversaturated with a lot of institutional investors, well, when they start selling, it becomes an avalanche, right? Because of course, one institutional investor exits, another one exits, and they have enough capital that could severely move the markets, right? And so, it's really good when you see a stock fresh like Tesla that has a lot of institutional investors, but it also has way more investors that come from retail, right? And then of course the benefit to that is that eventually when institutional investors come into Tesla, well, they're going to be adding buying pressure, and that's going to help Tesla in the long run. But anyways, as I was saying, talking about Tesla, let's go ahead and look at it as I was saying earlier and talk about this area right over here. So earlier in the video, I mentioned about this gap where we had the delivery numbers come up better than expected. And of course, when we had this gap, we also see that there's this area where there's little volume by price. And I say this all the time on the channel, when there's little volume by price, that's typically when you see the biggest movements. So if the stock's going down, when there's little volume by price, that's when you can see a lot of downward movement really fast. And the inverse would happen if the price action is going up. When there's little volume by price, well, that's when you'll see the stock spike up. And a perfect example of this would be this area right over here, right? As Tesla stock was trending upwards, notice how when there's little volume by price over here, we see these big candles going up. But then the reverse happens when there's selling pressure and there's little volume by price. We see the same characteristics where we see this big spike. Instead of going up, though, it's going down because the trend is downwards. And that's simply because, I say this all the time, you see this happening when there's low areas of volume relative to price, because there's not a lot of transactions happening between the bid and the ask. And so the directional or the direction of the trend will severely impact the books, right? It'll go ahead and move the order books up or down depending on the direction of the stock. And so, I say, hey, as we have the next 2 days going into this week, Monday and Tuesday, I would find it much more reasonable that the market's going to be a little bit panicky, as we're not going to know entirely how the CPI report's going to come. And so we're most likely going to see some selling going on. And as we see some selling when there's little volume by price, we're possibly, or more likely, I would say, see Tesla kind of come downwards and potentially fill up this gap, right? Now, of course, we've heard the Federal Reserve, right, or particularly a lot of the members from the FOMC committee reiterate that they still have a very hawkish stance, right? And now this could be problematic, especially for the overall economy, because one of the things I've highlighted in previous videos is that for, the impacts of monetary policies to be felt on the economy, it typically takes about a year to feel those changes, right? And so if we had the Feds hiking all into 2022, right? So if we kind of just go to a weekly time frame, all of 2022 was initially when we had the Feds hiking, right? And of course that caused a lot of panic in the market. And then of course there were several other reasons why Tesla fell. We had Elon sell a bunch to fund Twitter. I mean, there's several other things that came into the selling and downward pressures for Tesla. But realistically, the pressures of the interest rates being hiked up, we're now going to start feeling them because it takes a year for them to happen. And so we still have a bunch of interest rates that the economy has yet to feel, yet we've already seen some calamitous events like banks having a lot of stress, particularly regional banks. I mean, we've heard of Silicon Valley Bank and a few others, right? And so it's much more expected that we're going to continue into a deeper area of pain when we start feeling the economic pressures from the interest rates actually fully taking into effect. And so that's why the CPI report that's coming up this week is a very important report that we absolutely want to pay attention to, because we want to see the possibility of inflation still coming downwards, like what we saw with the PCE report, because that at least would let us know that, hey, if the Feds do hike, it could potentially just be a 25 basis points hike, which of course I think would still be bad to hike again. I think we still need to have another time to pause and kind of reevaluate what's currently going on. But of course, I don't make the decisions, right? There's a selective group of people that get paid to make those decisions. And so, that's something that we want to pay attention to. Now, if the CPI report comes out hot, well, that could be a lot more concerning, right? And so that then we could see more selling pressure happen, right? Because of course we've seen what happened in other countries, like in the UK, where inflation just spiked up again, right? Much more higher. And so that's a big concern, and we obviously don't want that to happen. And so that's why I always say we want to stay data dependent. So I expect the next couple of days to have a little bit of selling pressure, right? And it's not a bad thing, right? Especially seeing how far Tesla has come up this year. Coming down for a bit for some uncertainty wouldn't be too bad, right? It wouldn't be terrible, right? Of course, like I say, we want to stay data dependent and see what ends up happening, right? Now, from the perspective of a long-term investor, this may actually provide somewhat of a buying opportunity for Tesla. I mean, we really haven't had too many buying opportunities this year. I mean, unless you're just equally dollar cost averaging each month and allocating a certain amount of your capital or your paycheck to go ahead and invest into Tesla, well, then that's fine. But if you're also someone who invests, but you only kind when things are coming down, this way you could kind of benefit from the uptrend. There hasn't been too many opportunities besides, kind of a little bit towards the end of June before we actually started rallying back up again, right? And so this could provide another opportunity if you're someone who is long-term bullish on Tesla, right? And again, you have to be reasonable. I'm not someone who is putting all my money into Tesla. I think there's definitely a lot of value in diversifying into index funds, right? And of course, I do have exposure to Tesla, the individual stock, in my long-term portfolio, and I am bullish on Tesla long-term. And so if Tesla comes down, I will, most likely add more into my long-term portfolio as I see value in Tesla. But one of the things I often say is that you can't just trade or invest based on anyone else's opinion, right? So just because I'm saying this for Tesla, I highly recommend that you do not copy what I do and only invest or trade in what you see value in, right? It's unfortunate that I have to say that. I mean, it should be common sense, but unfortunately, sense is not that common, right? Now, for a trading or from a trading perspective, if like I've said multiple times on the channel, although I do think there's a possibility that Tesla's going to be coming down in the next couple of days, I don't like to even short Tesla in my short-term trading account, and I've said that even in the past, even when Tesla was coming down around this area. And one of the reasons I say that is because at any corner lurking, there's a lot of catalyst events that are kind of primed to pop up, right? Especially, we have these catalyst events of more, legacy auto companies joining the supercharging network for Tesla. And then I say, right around the corner, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we have the possibility of Cybertruck production starting, which I would believe would be a very bullish catalyst event. And so that's why for the short term, I don't even short Tesla. Now, if you're someone who trades in the short term, and you see value in shorting Tesla in the short term and taking advantage of that, by all means, go ahead and do that. I just personally, for me, like I said, I wouldn't like to do that. And what I would like to see is Tesla fall down a bit. And we see how there's this area where there's a lot of volume by price around here. Well, that means that we're possibly going to find an area of support and consolidate. Just as you see around this area, there aren't like just straight up trends going up and down, right? We kind of go up, down, up, down, up, down. Well, that's because there's a lot of volume over here. So there's a lot more of the bidding of going up and going down. And so that causes the stock to consolidate. And so, if Tesla does fall down here, well, from a trading perspective, I want to go ahead and see, well, is Tesla going to go back up again? Or is it going to break this area over here, right? And of course, the catalyst event following after this week is going to be the earnings for Tesla, right? And so if we see Tesla fall down and then consolidate for a bit, and then we have good earnings, well, that actually puts us at a great opportunity where we could see Tesla kind of start coming back up and get closer to the $300 level. Right? So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I like to provide as much utility as I can. And with that being said, guys, make sure to like, subscribe, and before you guys go, maybe leave a comment, and also check out this video right over here, and I'll see you guys possibly on that next video. Take care, guys.